section นี้ก็จะมี โอเค got it
Sorry about that. I just had to make sure my children were out of bed.
That should be okay, yeah.
But I'll share my screen.
Okay, maybe can, if you are ready, can we start now then?
Yep, brilliant.
Okay, wait a moment, please. Okay, wait a moment. Okay, I think it's a good time. Yeah, I think it's a good time to start at the moment. So, everyone, good afternoon, everyone. And first and foremost, I would like to take this opportunity to say Happy New Year, 2022. And I wish all positive starts in this new year with life, happiness, and work success, and good health. Again, thank you for showing interest and being a part of our PSU Open Mobility 2021 program today. This event is the first of 5 to be held in January. Today, we will have the opportunity to listen to our invited speakers to share knowledge and experiences in applied linguistic research. This session would not be possible without the support of our moderator. So, before we start the session today, I would like to thank Dr. Passan Jai for accepting the invitation and managing the session today. Dr. Passan is a lecturer at the Department of Foreign Languages, Faculty of Liberal Arts, Prince of Songkla University, Hajai campus. He received a doctorate degree in English language and applied linguistics from the University of Birmingham, United Kingdom. And his research interest lies in applied linguistics, lie in applied corpus linguistics actually, language pedagogy and teacher education. I would now like to welcome Dr. Passan on board, and please give him a round of applause. Dr. Passan, the stage is yours now.
Okay, so yeah, give me a few seconds. Okay. Give me a few seconds, sorry for this.
Yes, sure, no problem. Yeah, you can take your time.
Okay, so thank you, Jen Yusuf. Okay, and hi everyone. Again, a warm welcome and thank you for joining this webinar, Virtual Visiting Professor Series organized as part of the PSU Open Mobility 2021. Okay, do you find it challenging to do empirical research in applied linguistics, especially in Thailand context?
So yes,
very probably, yeah, for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, especially when we have to think of the new topic, for our research. It's somehow very interesting. Sometimes it's very difficult.
Yeah. So again, the problem comes when your work is reviewed by other reviewers. Right. Okay. So if your answer is yes, you are very, very fortunate today to attend this talk because we have an amazing speaker, Dr. Robert McKenzie, who will be sharing with us his views about doing empirical research in applied linguistics. Okay. So Robert is Associate Professor in Sociolinguistics at Northumbria University, UK. His research is focused mainly in the areas of variationist sociolinguistics, folk linguistics, and social psychology of language. Robert has a particular interest in folk perception of and attitudes towards spoken language variation. And in turn, he also investigates the ways in public perception of language variation impact upon communities of speakers more widely, including in England, Thailand, Japan, and Malaysia. His research is wide-ranging in scope and has focused on implicit and explicit public attitudes towards language variation, language attitude change, speech perception, language ideology and identity, the social psychology of language, spread and quantitative research methods in sociolinguistics. And also, Robert published a widely cited research monograph in 2010 entitled The Social Psychology of English as a Global Language. And as a result of the 2020-22 British Academic Mid-Career Fellowship Award, he is currently writing a further monograph detailing the results of large-scale sociolinguistic studies entitled Implicit and Explicit Language Attitudes, Mapping Accent Discrimination and Attitude Change in England. And what's special about Robert is that his research findings have features in a large number of newspaper and online media inside and outside the UK, and he has been invited to discuss a range of sociolinguistic issues on both radio and television. And today, Robert will be giving a talk entitled Doing Empirical Research in Applied Linguistics, Evidence from Language Attitude Research in Thailand. And I think everyone is now very excited to hear about what you are going to say, Robert. So please welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. That was such a nice introduction. I'm not sure I deserve it, but it's very nice. I should say it's very early in the morning here. Well, it's not early now. It's 8 o'clock now. Whoops. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and oops, there we go. And so I might take a little bit to warm up. But as you can see, I've got a cup of very strong coffee. So we'll see. I realise it's kind of getting into late afternoon for you. So we'll see. And also, as Patson said, I tend to do quantitative research, but I also do qualitative research. And please don't think that I'm during this talk I'm going to say one type of research is better than others. It's really not. This is what I say to my own PhD students. It's not the way I think. You choose the methods which are best for your research questions. So rather than saying, I want to do I do qualitative research, what can I do? Or I do quantitative research, what can I measure? You would say, this is what I want to find out. What's the best way to do it? So I'll talk about that. And I think last time I talked a bit quickly, so I'll try and talk a bit slower this time. Okay, so for some reason it's got it had lots and lots of color on it, but for some reason on my computer today I'm not sharing the color, so I do apologize for the black and whiteness.
It should be okay because we mainly focus on your content, not your color.
Oh, that's very nice of you, but I do have some diagrams, so we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to start from the beginning, and I'm going to start from kind of scientific principles, and hopefully for those new to research and those who do research, it will either confirm or give you an introduction to frameworks and how we tend to think about doing research, because really it's a formula, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing qualitative or ethnographic research or experimental research. It really is a formula, and once you know the key to this formula, then it's easier to read research papers, and once you can read research papers, you can write research papers. Okay, so in linguistics generally, or applied linguistics in particular, I'm kind of on the border between applied and social linguistics, is the scientific study of language, whatever scientific means, and please don't be scared of the word scientific. Okay. So if we go even further back, what do we mean by science? And I suppose from that, what do we mean by research? Now, this is probably what you think when you're thinking about science. We don't do that. Yeah, we don't really do that. So, if you say to someone, I'm a scientist, they would think that's what you do. Yeah, but we don't do that. But we are arguably language scientists, yeah, or educational scientists. Okay, and traditionally, we use what's called the scientific method, and this is developed hundreds of years ago. So what we do is we observe a phenomenon. That might be, for example, in an educational context, so proficiency in the classroom, one teacher getting better results than another teacher, one cohort of students getting better test results than another teacher, or like myself, attitudes towards variation, or more frequent use of particular sound between younger and older people. And then we formulate hypothesis. Hypothesis is a statement, and the research question is a question. So we either use a hypothesis or a question to try and investigate the issue. So in an educational context, it might be, why do females get better results in an English test than males? Yeah, that's a phenomenon. And a hypothesis from that might be females are genetically superior to males at language learning. Now, I'm not saying that's true or false, but there is some evidence that females have better verbal ability than males. That might be because it's social, or it might be because it's genetic. Okay? But that's a hypothesis. And then what we do is we carry out an experiment using some kind of measurement, which we call an instrument. And then we test this hypothesis or question, and if we find a result which agrees with a hypothesis, we accept it. And the important word here is tentatively, because it's not the only research we'll ever do on it. We have some evidence. We don't have proof. We have some evidence. Okay, it's not truth, it's evidence. And if we disagree, if the data disagree with the hypothesis, then we formulate a new one. Okay, or retest it in another context, or using different measures. And really, I make it sound very simple. That's it. Yeah, that's all researchers do. We're just trying to add to our world knowledge. The last person to reinvent linguistics or applied linguistics was Chomsky in 1959. Yep, you don't have to answer all the linguistics or applied linguistics or educational questions in the world. A little question is enough. A little question in depth. Okay, I'm writing a book just now, and it's just like doing a PhD again, except I've only got 1 year to do it. And it's exactly this, you know, I've only got like 2 questions, but I've just written 80,000 words. You know, that's the way I was taught. Okay, so quite often when you read research, you see examples of unscientific claims, things which are a matter of opinion rather than based on data. Okay, examples in the real world might be the weather is good. Okay, you come from Thailand, you probably don't think the weather is good in the UK. Yeah, don't worry, I don't mind. If you come from Iceland or Greenland, the weather is good in the UK. Yeah, so the weather is good isn't empirical. It's not based on data. It's based on subjectivity. Okay, that's an unscientific claim. Beethoven's Fifth is the greatest piece of music ever written. Yeah, okay. But there's no way to test that because of the word greatest. We can't measure greatest. We can't measure good for the weather. Okay, we should not steal or tell lies. Sounds really good. Yeah, but I'm sure we all agree with that. Although we probably maybe do the last one a little bit now and again. But it's not based on science. It's based on morality. Okay. So, can you think of any other unscientific claims that you might see in the? I mean, just if you think it's a good idea for me to try and get the audience to participate here, or should I just speak?
I think you can decide yourself. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to say any other examples of unscientific claims? Don't be shy. If nobody wants to say anything, I'll say something. Okay, so US English is easier to understand than British English. I would say that. For who? For who? I come from the UK. British English is easier for me to understand. It's not to do with the English, it's to do with your experience. Children, this is a very second language acquisition. Children possess an innate language acquisition device dedicated to language processing, i.e., this is Chomsky. There's a little bit in our brain which is responsible for language. Well, we can't test that yet. It's a good theory, but we can't test it because we don't have the technology. Maybe in 50 years' time. So these are theoretical claims, but there's no way we can test them. So we can't test them with research or empirical research. Okay. However, I've mentioned the word empirical, and in traditions of research, we have empirical research against rationalism. Rationalism is like mathematics, where we can prove something. Okay, and I'll give you an example. So this is from Greek philosophy. All men are mortal, all men will die. That's very nice for me to say early in the morning. Socrates, the Greek philosopher, is the man. So Socrates is mortal. That's rationalism. Yeah, that's what we call rationalism. It's not based on data. And the one we always do in the UK, I know people don't drink alcohol in the south of Thailand, but all writers are alcoholics. John is a writer. John is an alcoholic. It's based on rationalism. But we can't do this with empirical research. This is proof, but we're looking for evidence. So we're not looking to prove anything. If a researcher tells you that they've proved something, be wary, be skeptical. Okay. Not every issue can be resolved by logical deduction. We can't do this for everything, but we can do it for some things. Okay. Okay. Quite often, it's tempting to do pseudoscience. Okay. And in the 1960s, there was lots of arguments between experimental researchers and qualitative researchers, people who did interviews, about, qualitative research isn't real science, it's pseudoscience. It's not true. That was 60 years ago. Yeah. No measure or no method is better than others, but some are better for the questions that you're asking. So let's have a little look. So pseudoscience, you do not use the scientific method, so you don't test a hypothesis. You make vague, untestable claims, things which you can't possibly get data from. So, for example, about things in your brain, for example, that we can't test. Rely on confirmation rather than refutation. That's quite scientific words here. We have an idea. We look for evidence which supports that idea rather than trying to disprove that idea, to say it's not true. So I believe this. What evidence can I find to support that? That's not the way to do it. Okay, and we ignore contradictory evidence. Maybe you've seen some of these in master's degrees or BA degrees or PhDs, where the literature reviews only the literature reviews the part of the thesis which only agrees with. So they've all the research which disagrees is not in the thesis or the dissertation. Okay, so we don't rely on arguments. We don't rely on how we feel, and we don't rely on authority figures. Okay, so it's quite easy to say, this person is professor, so he knows better. Well, we have to judge research on its merits. So, for example, if you submit a paper to a journal, we usually don't know the name of the person. And that's because we don't want to be influenced. We don't want the referee to be influenced by who we think is writing the paper. Yeah. Okay, so another little cartoon. So the scientific method, here are the facts. What conclusions can we draw from them? And creationist method in American politics. If you think about Donald Trump, here's the conclusion. What facts can we find to support it? So I suggest the scientific method is better for our research. Okay, the scientific method is better for our research. And I suppose this leads us on to our next question. Why do we do research? Now, before I go into an academic reason for this, reasons why we do research are because we're doing a course, because we want to finish our master's degree, because we want to do a PhD, because we want to get published, or because our tutor tells us to, or for example, in the UK, because our job tells us to. If I don't do research, I get sacked. Well, actually, I don't get sacked. What I do is I get more teaching. No, I like teaching, but I want to do research as well. So why do research? We want to find out more. Yeah, basically, what we discussed in the beginning, we want to go beyond what we know, just a little bit. So, for example, if I've got time, and I might not have time today, I've got a paper. I was doing lots of work on attitudes towards English in Japan, but I didn't know much about it in Thailand. So my research niche, my gap, was we've got some evidence from Japan. How does this compare to Thailand? Yeah. So I'm not changing the world, but I'm adding a little bit more by finding how attitudes to English are different or similar in Japan and Thailand. And that's a little research, we call that a research niche. If you're new to this, so N-I-C-H-E. And we use niche or space, and we usually find this before the introduction, before the methodology. In a paper, you'll find this at the end of the introduction, just before the methodology and just before the research questions in a paper. And it will say something like, there is a lack of, there is a need, or there is a further requirement. When you see these words in a paper, this means this is my research niche. What am I doing, or what is this researcher doing that hasn't been done before? Okay. And it doesn't need to change the world. It might be a difference in place, Japan, Thailand. It might be a difference in time. Hasn't been done for 30 years. It might be that the participants are different. It might be, for example, you did this looking at, Fazia would look at writing. You might be looking at speaking. It might be that you looked at differences between gender. You might be looking at differences this time between ages. So these are all research niches, and hopefully I'll give you some examples of this later. So basically we want to add to the world just a little bit. Yeah. So, and we investigate causal relationships. So relationships between things. So, what is the role of teaching on oral proficiency or written proficiency? I'm sure Fazia would be able to tell me. What is the relationship between class size and exam results? Do students in smaller classes get better exam results than students in bigger classes? Yeah, these are big decisions, and they have implications for policy. Okay, so it's very difficult to determine causal relationships. So when we talk about poverty, why people are poor, the causes and effects of these are very complex. Yeah? It's not just about economics and finance, although of course that plays a part, but education, etc., housing. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about for the next little time as an experiment is a simplified model of the world which allows the researcher to manipulate a particular variable. And you may not have heard of the word variable. Does anyone want to give me a definition? It's a very easy definition. A variable is something which varies, which differs. Okay, so for example, gender, you could have male or female, or what we call here now transgender or cisgender.
Mm.
You could have upper class, middle class, lower class. You could have young, middle-aged, and old. Just something which we measure, which can change.
Mm.
Okay? And that's just, when you hear the word variable, don't be frightened. It just means something we can measure.
Mm.
Okay. So some myths about what we do or what we don't do. To be scientific, you have to employ numbers and complex statistics. Well, some people do, if it suits their research question. Okay. Usually, when I do something that employs lots of participants, I'm trying to generalize to a bigger population. So maybe I've got many Thai students. I'm trying to talk about all of Thai students. If you're doing something more qualitative, more ethnographic, for example, you might just be wanting to case study, and you probably won't need numbers and complex statistics. Okay, so it depends what you want to find out. The intuition of researchers has no role to play. Well, it's 90% hard work and 10% creativity. We have to be creative to think of the research gap. When we get the data, we have to interpret the data according to our knowledge of the world as well. So the same data can have different interpretations. Doesn't matter what. One researcher might look at the data and say, this is saying this. And another researcher might look at the data and say, this is saying the opposite. It depends how you interpret it. And that's what we mean by intuition. Scientifics are entirely objective and have no favorite theories or paradigms. That's not true. That's a myth. Generally, because I come from a psychology background, if I can do something experimentally, I will. If I can't, I'll do it qualitatively in more small scale. That's not right or wrong. It's just, it says something about me. Yeah, it's my experience. It's not better or worse. Other researchers who have been more trained in qualitative techniques will try to do something qualitatively. And then if it doesn't work or they're trying to generalize, they'll maybe do it a little bit more with numbers and statistics. It's not good or bad. Okay. And we need both. Okay. Scientists are loners who hide in their labs' offices and never talk to anyone. What do you think? Is this what we do as academics, as students? I'm not sure I disagree with that one. Anyway, I know plenty of loners. So, is this okay so far? Are you following me? Am I going too slow, too fast?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's much better than the last time, yeah.
I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. So, different researchers approach, what I'm really saying is different researchers approach the same problem or issue from different theories and methods. Okay, some of us will have our particular theories that we're testing. So second language acquisition theories, applied linguistic theories about language policy, about world Englishes, etc. Some of us will have qualitative methodologies. Some of us will have quantitative methodologies. Some of us will use ethnographic studies. Some of us will use interviews. We need it all. Yeah, we need it all. Try not to, my advice, well, what I tell my PhD students is try not to think one method is better than another. We need everybody, there's space for everyone. Okay, so when you publish your results, and this is when a referee, when you're trying to publish a paper or submitting a PhD or a master's degree, I would pay a lot of attention to your methodology. Okay, the reason that we write a very precise, very specific methodology is that we're trying to tell the reader how to replicate it. And by replicate here, we mean if I want to do this study the same in another place or with another population, how would I do it? Okay, so in a methodology, therefore, we need details about the participants, informants, and whatever you want to call them. We need details about the measures or instruments, so questionnaire or ethnographic interviews or open interviews, closed interviews. Yeah. And then we need something about procedure, how we did it, which is quite an easy bit to write. If you read if you read a paper and it's all procedure, be careful. It means that the study needs a bit more refinement. And maybe if it's a big study, we maybe do a pilot study, so we test our instruments. And increasingly in the UK, and I'm guessing in Thailand too, often in the methodology, you have an ethics section.
Yes, of course, yes.
Yeah. It's becoming. I'm quite old. When I did my PhD, we didn't need to do that, but we have to do it now, and it's a good idea. So participants, instruments or measures, which is things like questionnaires, procedure, and then a little bit pilot study and maybe ethics.
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe how to analyze the data as well.
Yeah, I usually leave. Personally, I leave that to the results. But some people put it in the methodology. You're basically telling a story, yeah. And that chapter can end with "This is how I analyze my data," or the next chapter can begin with "How I analyze my data." That's a really good point, Yusuf. Yeah, some people put in, particularly qualitative research, often put in how. And if anybody does corpus research, looks at corpuses, analyzes corpus, then which is increasingly important in applied linguistics and education.
Actually, it's good, to try to explain the process. I mean, in regarding the methodology in the paper, when we prefer to publish the paper, however, sometimes we might not able to explain them in details because of the number of word counts of the journals.
Yeah.
So sometimes we just
I agree. I mean, if you're writing a paper and it's 5,000 words, you can't. The literature review and the methodology can't really be any more than 2,000, because most of the paper will be judged on the results and the discussion.
Yeah, but still, it's somehow very significant for the paper because, I mean, from my experience, I mean, methodology section is somehow very significant and important because it shows the validity of our paper as well, how much our paper is reliable.
Yeah, I agree entirely. You've put it very well. You're right. I do a lot of, because I've been working at universities for a long time, I do a lot of refereeing for journal papers, and I know other people in the audience do too. And before I look at anything, I always look at the research questions at the end of the introduction and the methodology. Well, maybe I look at the abstract, and then I look at the research niche at the end of the introduction, the research questions and methodology, and then I can more or less write my review from that. And then the other stuff is just stuff, yeah? Because I know if the methodology and research questions are very precise, the paper's publishable. Yeah? It doesn't matter if I agree or disagree with the results. That's not the point of refereeing. The point is it robust? Yeah, it's not whether they agree or disagree with me. Yeah. Okay. I thought I would talk about linguistics more generally, but not in a kind of a teacher way, just linguistics. And I tried to include education because I realize some people here are educationalists. Okay, so in my field, theoretical linguistics describes the rules that speakers know and use, okay, and explain the broad reasons for these. So I'm not a theoretical linguist. Theoretical linguists tend not to do empirical research. They tend to not to collect data. But for me, and most applied, I'm a kind of applied linguistics as well, like most of you. Amongst other things, social linguists and applied linguists describe, for example, speakers' attitudes towards language variation and implications for language use. I'm a social linguist. I look at language use and frequency of language use and what that means for wider speech communities. Now, for applied linguistics, you might not call these people speech communities. You might call these people students or policymakers or stakeholders. But these are the same ideas. We look at data within populations, okay? And then we get a sample of that population. So we get our population. So in linguistics, there's research which is mainly theoretical or descriptive. and quite often uses rationalism, we talked earlier. And then there's research, which is very empirical. Now, sociolinguists and applied linguists sometimes write paper on theories, but I'm not going to talk about the theory writing today. I'm going to talk about data collection, doing research. Okay, so what we do generally has implications for educational policy practice. If you're doing anything about SLA, second language acquisition, but language acquisition, and generally for wider society. So generally, the majority of research in our field, linguistics or education, which collects data, has applied implications. So for me, the word applied linguistics goes from anything to ELT, because you're applying it to the classroom, to variationist social linguistics, like I do look at language variation, or corpus, or historical linguistics. If you're collecting data, it has implications for society. Okay, so in generally, we're all applied linguistics. We're all applied linguists. Okay, so this is a question which probably many of you have met at some point. Now, this is a very broad question, and of course, it's not really a research question, but it's a theme. It's a question theme. Why is it so difficult to learn a language in adulthood? Now, there's lots of different ways of investigating this. And there's lots of different ways of investigating this according to your theories. So if anybody wants to say anything, please feel free to jump in. Of course, I'm going to give you my ideas too, but why is it so difficult to learn a language in adulthood?
We are too conscious.
Yeah, so yeah, we're self-conscious and we're anxious, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, or it might be that we've lost something which children have. A language acquisition to anyway. I'll give you some ways of thinking about this. So potential factors, that there's a critical period. For example, that children, and if you've done anything about second language acquisition, you'll probably come across the critical period hypothesis. There's a period that where it's very good to learn second languages or any languages. And then after about the age of 5 or 6 or 12 or 14, researchers don't agree about this switches off. So once you become an adult, you can never sound like a native speaker, whatever that means. And let's not go there, because like most of you, I have extreme doubts about what we mean by native speaker, and I'll leave that for other speakers of this series. It might be learning style, that children learn differently from adults. Yeah, that children, I think you said, learn unconsciously and we learn consciously. Or children aren't shy to learn and make mistakes, but we are. It might be that children are more motivated. Maybe many of our students, for example, don't want to learn English or in the UK another foreign language because they don't see the point. It doesn't affect their real life, it only affects their exam results. But children probably learn the language because they want to participate in society and talk to their parents and friends. And yeah. It might be exposure. Children receive better input. That means we talk to our children differently in an L2 than we talk to adults. Yeah, might be that. Might be that we give them comprehensible input. And if you've read Krashen, you'll know about I+1, just above the level of what we know. Anyway, I didn't mean this to be a second language acquisition. Or it might be type of interaction. It's not just children get more. It might be that they get different types of interaction with maybe their parents, for example, are more patient with them, spend more time with them, give them more time to reply. Yeah. Okay. So lots of different ways we could measure this. If you were going to do just for yourself, maybe if you can speak if you like or don't speak, if you were going to measure difficulty in learning a second language in adulthood, what one of these would you measure and why? Have a think. Please feel free to speak or not speak. Does anyone want to say anything, or will I move on? Don't be shy.
I would be much interested in the motivation, but I know that it's still something that is going on, which is quite to me it's quite challenging to be measured. But I have also learned that exposure have been measured quite a lot, and there are always two sides of the arguments. And now let's hear it from you and the panel.
Anyone else? Hang on. Oh, okay. That's brilliant. To be quite honest, this is more or less the whole field of second language acquisition, and people have been measuring this for 80, 100 years at least. We could, and probably it's not one of these things. Probably it's an interaction between all these things. So what I'm saying is, if you're trying to answer research questions, you don't need to find the answer. You can keep going with this. Yeah, there's many different ways to measure broad questions like this. So if you have a research paper and you're trying to answer this question, probably quite stressful. Okay, you don't need to learn to answer something as big as this, but you need maybe to take a little piece of it in one particular context amongst one particular group of students, okay, with one particular method of doing it. That's all you need to do. Okay, so, sorry, I should have said identity, but I think this is really for the other sessions on world Englishes. Do children have an identity in their first language, and we have a different identity in your L2? So I should have said it. For example, my second language is Italian. When I speak Italian, I start to move my hands around. I'm much more extrovert, sociable. So I'm guessing some of you speak Malay, some of you you all speak Thai, and you all speak English. And I'm guessing other languages, you're fantastic. Are you different when you speak those languages? Are you a different person? These are interesting questions. Not for today, but these are things we could measure. Okay. I don't know why the red is there, but it's fine. Why does teacher A get better results than teacher B? Which basically is lots of educational research, isn't it? And also, if you work in a university, this is a very dangerous question. We try not to, but this, why does teacher A, why does teaching method A get better results than teaching method B? Okay, so better teaching methods, more or less intimidating personality, that you like the person, more likable, very similar, better students. Yeah, the students started off, you have some years you have a cohort, you have a group of students who are very good or come from a very high base, and next year you have to have a lower base. It happens. Better teaching conditions, better materials. Oops. So again, this is a very broad question and not the type of thing that we would answer. We would probably talk about the teaching methods. We would compare two teaching methods. We would compare personality factors, for example, introvert, extrovert. We would ask the students beforehand whether they liked their teacher, and then test them on entrance, and then test them on exit. We would test the students at the beginning and at the end and see how much progress they've made to see if they're better students. And then we'd look at the teaching conditions. Now, as you know, there's been lots, I'm guessing in Thailand too, lots of money spent on teaching. That's so that students get better results. That's why we have new materials. That's why we have classroom assistants, etc. Sorry, carry on.
Actually, back to your previous slide, you mentioned about the identity. I think I feel somehow very interesting because where I live now, it's like we am living in a community with some, I mean, one speak more than one language. Like some people speak like Malay as the first language, and Arabic as a second language, and Thai as the third language, and English like the fourth language. So sometimes I'm wondering, because what I have learned so far, I mean, we have more than one identity, right? And normally we're gonna have like a one core identity. So it's really found the studies that how to see, I mean, to see the relationships between when someone, you know, when they switch to one language to another. I mean, do the language they speak influence or have like a somehow like an impact based on who they are or not? I think it's somehow very interesting. Do they change, you know? Do they change themselves? Do they change their identity, you know, based on the language they speak?
I think you're absolutely
somehow
right.
Very interesting, because sometimes I feel like even me, sometimes when I speak Thai, when I speak English, and when I speak Malay, you know, I feel myself like my identity, you know, somehow they are not exactly the same, but it's very difficult to explain this phenomenon actually.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm entirely with you. Well worth investigating. It's really good to investigate these questions, but they're very complex. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's very hard to be a speaker of a second language speaker. It's hard to be in the situation where someone has more proficiency than you or has more experience than you. I know, because I go to Italy and suddenly it's very easy for me to speak English now because I've been doing it all my life. But when I go to Italy, I'm the one who's always not understanding or catching up. It's hard. It's hard, and my identity is different. I'm much less confident.
I think it's not only the language that we speak that somehow influence when we speak. Also our interlocutors that we communicate to. For example, when I speak English with Thai speakers, comparing when I speak English to my Thai friends and when I speak English to like a foreign friends, I feel more relaxed when I speak English to my foreign friends. Comparing to when I speak English with my Thai friends, somehow, you know.
You think you're being judged?
That's what I feel.
I understand. Well, you don't have to worry about that. Okay. So what I'm trying to do with these results is I'm trying to show you what happens when you get you ask a very broad research question. You can break it down and break it down and break it down and break it down. And I think when we're doing research, the more specific the question, the easier it is to address, the easier it is to investigate. Broad questions are difficult because then you have to develop a questionnaire, for example, to measure something huge. If you can break it down and break it down and break it down amongst a very specific population, a very specific sample of people, for example, and a very specific question, and define what you're measuring, whether that's qualitative or quantitatively, it's much easier. So in some ways, less is more, less is better. Okay. So this is a little bit of terminology, and this is something which
I mean, yes, I think it's good that you have just mentioned that. I mean, if we have like a specific research question, it's going to be easier for conducting research, right? But one of the main challenging for me, or maybe for some others as well, how can we narrow it down? Do you have any like a technique or strategies to share with us how to narrow like a research question? We use like a broad research question and try to narrow it down. Do you have any strategies to share? Maybe?
Literature review. From the literature review, define what you mean, define what you're measuring. So for example, if you're saying if you're measuring like I measure attitudes, what do we mean by attitudes? What do we mean by identity? If you can define it, you can measure it. Or if you can define it, you can think of a way to measure it. The example, I come from a psychology background, and when I did this when I was 18, this is when they told me to do this when I was 8, because they teach you experimental methods. They said, does love exist? If you don't think it exists, you can't measure it. So you have to decide what it is and does it exist before you can measure it. If love exists, is it something in your head? Is it something in your heart?
Mhm.
Yeah, is it something in your behavior? If you think it's a feeling, then you're going to measure people's feelings.
Mhm.
If you think it's something in their head, you're going to ask them about their beliefs. Yeah. If you think it's about behavior, I don't know, buying people roses and, meeting with people, etc., then you're going to measure the frequency of behavior.
Mhm.
So if you can define it, you can measure it. Yeah. Also, I think it's a really good question. Also, I mean, I'm going to talk about this a wee bit later if I've got. I'm sorry, I'm speaking Scottish. A little bit later if I've got time. If so, you can define it, but also you don't need to invent it. You can look at what's done in previous research and take the question and put it in another context. Okay. So, for example, I talked earlier about my research in Japan. I'd say, what are the attitudes of Japanese university students towards, I don't know, L1 and L2 English varieties? I would just change when I go do it in Thailand.
Mhm.
I just took that research and said, what are the attitudes of Thai research of Thai university students towards blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
You don't need to invent everything.
Mhm.
You're only taking ideas and moving them somewhere else. Yeah. Anyway, hopefully this will be. Does anybody want to say anything about that? I'm really pleased people are speaking.
Yeah, maybe based on your presentation, one thing that came up, one topic that came up into my mind is like, does Thai English exist?
Yeah. Do you want my answer?
No, it's just kind of just sharing my idea.
Yeah.
It's good to explore about this, because what I have found so far, some Thai scholars, they somehow believe that Thai English exists, but some other scholars, they might not believe that Thai English exists. So
yeah, I think in the end, it depends. What do you want to measure? Do you want to measure, for example, to what extent do Thai university students believe Thai English exists? So does Thai English exist is a theoretical question.
Mm-hmm.
We can't find evidence for or against it from data. But we can say, for me, I'm a sociolinguist, so if the community of Thai speakers thinks it exists, it exists. Yeah. So, for example, as a sociolinguist, Danish and Norwegian used to be the same language. It used to be called Norwegian. Danish from Denmark. Danish and Norwegian were the same language. They were all called Danish. Denmark and Norway had a war. Norway became independent, and there were suddenly two languages, Danish and Norwegian. The languages didn't change. Well, they didn't change at that point, but the politics changed. The idea changed. Yeah. So these things are very complex, and I know Yusuf knows all about this. Okay. Hopefully, is it okay to move on? Is that fine?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. But please do. When we're doing research, talking about research, it's really good to interact. So please don't feel shy. So you might have heard the word dependent and independent variable. It sounds scary. It's not. Promise. You do this, and if you haven't heard these words, you do this in your research or in your essays, you maybe just don't know you do this. I don't know where that red marker came from, but never mind. Okay. If you remember what we said about a variable, it's something we measure which changes or varies or differs. So, for example, gender, we can have different genders, we can have different ages, we can have different social classes, we can have different strengths.
Browse, maybe.
Yep. We can have different strengths of coffee, different driving skills, different sleeping times. Yeah, these are variables, and we can measure them if we want. Oops, what happened there? There we go. Okay, so every research, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you, but we haven't seen your screen. Please.
Oh, okay. Sorry, something happened. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
I'll share again.
Yes. Good. Thank you.
Quite strange. I didn't touch anything. Sorry, folks. Is that better?
It's coming. Yes. Now it's coming back.
Is that it?
Yes.
Sorry, people. And I realize I'm talking a lot here. So the dependent variable, sometimes called DV, and please don't be, if you haven't come across these, please don't be scared of this. This is the thing that we measure, the variable that we measure. It's the thing that we must measure. So, for example, that could be attitudes. It could be identity. It could be easier. It could be height. It could be weight. It could be age. It could be gender. But usually it's something that we call a construct. So in linguistics or education, we measure things like proficiency. Proficiency is hard to measure. Spoken, I'll use Faz's word, written proficiency. Proficiency in English writing is hard to measure. We need some kind of scale. Yeah?
Yes. Ajahn Faisal, how do you measure your students' writing proficiency in your class?
Rubric, of course.
Can you make it clearer?
Yeah, we need some kind of scale.
Yes.
Okay, so quite often this is called the outcome or the effect. And every experiment, every type of research that collects data must have a dependent variable. We must measure something. Sometimes qualitative researchers don't like the word measure. If you prefer investigate or examine, that's fine by me. Don't worry about it. Life's too short to worry about this sort of qualitative, quantitative stuff, you know, throw it away. Research is either good or it's not good. It doesn't matter how you do it. Okay. All research questions or hypotheses contain a dependent variable. And I'll give you, of course, I'm going to give you some examples. An independent variable, not every experiment has an independent variable. Usually, this is the variable which affects the other variable. Now, that sounds very complicated, but it might be, how does gender influence proficiency? We want to measure proficiency, and then we want to look at differences between males and females. Okay, so we can have an experiment that says, for example, I'll use Faz's idea again. What is the written proficiency using a rubric of Faz's level 1 university students? Okay, that's a research question. What is the proficiency? But we could also say for the independent variable, are there any differences in proficiency between males and females amongst Faz's written Thai university class students? That's a very long question. I'm sure you could do a better research question, but you get the idea. So the dependent variable is what we're measuring, and the independent variable is something that we're measuring which might influence it. So we have a tendency in applied linguistics and social linguistics in education to measure variables like age, social class, identity, teaching method, gender. When we use independent, these tend to be independent variables or IVs, but not always. But so if you see the influence of, if you see a title like the influence of social factors, the influence on gender, the influence on age, you know it's an independent variable. Okay, so a little research question that contains an independent variable. What is the effect of coffee on driving performance? Okay, I only said this because I was writing this and I knew it would be early in the morning and I need a strong cup of coffee. What is the effect of coffee on driving performance? Can you tell me, or can you think what might be the independent variable and what might be the dependent variable? if you want a clue, you can always take if you take out the independent variable, it's still a. If you take out the dependent variable, it's not a question. So there's two possibilities. The question could either be, what is the effect of coffee? Or what is driving performance? Which one do you think, if you were doing an experiment, which one would you measure? You would measure driving skill.
Driving performance, maybe?
Yeah. Driving performance is what we would measure. And probably we would have some kind of road.
Mm-hmm.
And we would test people on that road. Yeah. And we try to keep the driving conditions similar. So we would control for confounding variables. So when you do an experiment, you have to control for. So we would do it on the same weather conditions. We would do it on the same type of day, with the same type of informants of drivers.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're measuring is the dependent variable. So driving performance is how we would measure it. Are you good or bad, or 50% or 60%, or how many people do you knock down, or how many accidents do you have? Yeah. How might we measure the independent variable, coffee? What could we do? It's hard.
Yeah.
Sorry, are you asking us a question?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just putting it out there.
Coffee.
Sorry. So we could probably tell the other drivers to drink more coffee, and then the other drivers would drink less coffee, something like that. Or we can manipulate the brand of coffee, probably how we roast coffee and all that.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, I can't see who's speaking, but thank you very much for that. You would measure, so you would have to define what we mean by coffee.
Mm-hmm.
You'd probably mean caffeine. Yeah. So I've left that quite vague. You would have to talk about caffeine. Yeah. You would give one group, which we call the experimental group. You would divide the participants into two groups. You would have one group which you give coffee, you would give 4 cups of coffee to, or a certain amount of caffeine to. And then you would have another group who you give no coffee to. And this is called the control group. So there's 2 groups, experimental group and control group. And then you would compare driving performance, yeah, under the same conditions. So for example, if one of the groups did it in the snow and one of the groups did it in the sunshine, you would get different results anyway. It wouldn't be the coffee that would be causing the difference. It might be the weather conditions, yeah, and it would use the same test. With things like gender, of course, it's easier because you ask people their gender, yeah. That's very good. Of course, I've given you an example, a more general example, but we could do that easily in implied linguistics. Okay, and her hypothesis from that might be coffee intake will have a negative effect on driving performance. The more coffee you have, the worse your driving performance will be. I'm not sure I agree with that. I've had a nice cup of coffee this morning, and I think I'm beginning to talk a little bit faster. I don't know if my presentation's any better. Anyway, identify the DV and the IV. So the dependent variable is driving performance. The independent variable is coffee or coffee difference. Remember, what's important here is we don't need an independent variable, but we always need a dependent variable. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is this, I know I've taken a bit of time with this. Is this helpful? Yeah. Just humor me and just look happy. Okay. So if I could give you time if you want to write research questions or hypotheses, or I could give you some examples. would you like, as an audience, would you like to try and put some in the chat? Or yeah, some people have put things in. Yeah, miles. Yep. Or would you like me to just move on?
Sorry, I can't see your screen.
You can't see my screen?
I can see.
You
I
can.
can.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Probably my problem. Okay, don't worry then. Okay, just move on.
If you want, I can stop sharing and share again.
I think it's okay. You can move on.
Okay, it's okay now.
Yeah.
Okay now.
Okay. Sorry, Patson.
Yeah, sorry
Oh,
for that.
yeah, but you're absolutely right. For some reason it's not. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. So I'm getting towards the end of this part of the presentation, and I'll then talk to you about what we're doing next. So this was Yusuf's very, very excellent question before. This is really what Yusuf was asking in a much more specific way than this. He was really asking, we want to do research questions. Where do they come from? Which means, more or less, how do we get them? Okay, so the number one thing, and this is what I always tell my own PhD students, and I always try and keep in mind for myself, because I'm like you, I'm always learning as a researcher as well, especially from published research. Okay, we're trying to extend what's been done before, and we don't need to destroy it all. We build on it, okay, in some small way. So if, for example, someone measured coffee in driving performance amongst Japanese students, we could do it amongst Thai students. If someone measures English proficiency in the north of Thailand, in Chiang Mai, we could measure it in Patani in the south. Yeah. If we measured English proficiency in final year university students, we could measure it in first year university students. Yeah. If we measured oral proficiency previously, FASE might want to measure written proficiency. Yeah, because really that's what you're doing when you're testing. Testing is a type of research. Okay, so the important thing is to find a research niche, and it's hard. Read the literature, and really there's three parts of this. From the literature review, what do we know? What do we have evidence for, first of all? What is missing? And words like, you'll see in the paper, you'll see words like lack of, need, requirement, more. If you come across these words, it means they're trying to tell you a research niche at the end of the introduction in the paper. And then from that, this is missing. What am I going to do? Yeah, you don't need to answer all those things that are missing. You just need to add to it. And these research questions come from your interest. Don't do research that you're not interested in. It's boring.
I mean, from my experience, I think sometimes the research questions do not only come from the existing research, but we also try to, when we conduct research, sometimes we also want to prove the existing gap or the existing body of knowledge or the existing theory. So so sometimes research questions can also come from the existing theories or the existing research, which is already published.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's very hard to invent something new.
Yes.
And I never do it. I always take some idea and extend it. I'm not. I think I said before, the last person to do it in linguistics was Chomsky in 1959. And even he didn't collect data. That's what, 60 years ago. All research since then has just been building on things. Yeah, why not? So it comes from what you're interested in. Don't do something new. If you're not interested in oral proficiency, spoken proficiency, don't measure it. That's it. Your experience of practice, your ideas of what is interesting come from your teaching, maybe your lectures. for example, I started to get interested in attitudes towards world Englishes because I taught lots of students in the UK, in Glasgow University, where I used to work, who spoke with different varieties. And I read the literature and it said, and participants are positive towards L1 varieties and generally negative towards L2 varieties. And I thought, that's not true. It's more complicated than that. So I started measuring varieties. Yeah, so that was my experience, and I just developed what was done before. Your role or position, if you're a teacher, you might want to do educational research. A manager, you might want to do research that involves people. A researcher, I'm a social linguist. I do social linguistic research because I'm interested in variation. The particular features of your school, university, or organization, maybe because you teach English in a Thai institution, you're interested in identity, like Yusuf. Yeah, you're interested in identity of English identity. Maybe because you teach writing, you're interested in English proficiency. Yeah. But conversations with colleagues, that's why it's so great to go to research seminars. You get ideas. Yeah, you form alliances, you work together, you collaborate. When I collaborate with, I'm working with a psychologist just now. My research would be different if he wasn't involved. He's inputted his ideas in. Yeah, it's hard. You might be interested in policy. You might be interested in measuring proficiency in Thailand because you're interested in changing things or influencing things. Yeah, you might be told by other people to do research. You need to do a PhD or you're not going to get promoted. Yeah, you need to publish 5 papers and blah, 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 blah. We all know, we've all been there. Or sometimes, for example, I'm funded by the British Academy, which is basically the British government, but don't tell anyone. They more or less, they tell me you can do this research, but you have to impact in some ways. You have to show it to certain people or talk about policy. Yeah, they let me do my research, but they also influence it in ways. Yeah, okay. I've gone on. I'm going quite slowly with this. Is it useful?
Yeah, it's useful. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, because I've got lots more stuff, but
I think one more resource that our research questions come from is that maybe can come from our webinar today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you, I'm suggesting that you can. It's not as difficult as you might think to make your own research.
I'm thinking of inviting you to do some research, maybe with me after this session. I got some ideas. Yeah.
Well, I'd be honored. Okay.
Professor.
Okay, I'm going to lecture. Okay.
Can we ask a question, or can I?
Of course you can, please. Sorry, what's your name? I can't see the. Oh, please ask your question.
Okay. Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Can you see?
Hi. Hello, Claudine.
Hi. Okay. I hope it's not too much because I've never done research and I'm a novice, so yep. I don't know much. But can you do for us? Can you formulate a research question for us? So can you try to demonstrate that? I mean, for example, I'll give you a situation. And can you formulate a research question for us?
Remember, I don't know the literature though, so I'm just making
yeah. But for me, for example, I've observed that, so I'll try to narrow it down. I've observed that my students are more confident during online class. And I've observed that they are, so I'm thinking, are they more confident online rather than face-to-face because they are studying from the comfort of their bedroom, the boudoir, right? So is that affecting? Yeah. So can you formulate a research question based on that?
Okay, I think this is actually at least 2 research questions. I mean, before I say about research, there's lots and lots of different ways of doing it. Mm-hmm. I'll give you one example. So you started off with a theory that online students are more confident than students are more confident online than face-to-face. Yeah, that is an assumption.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
first of all, you would have to say, is there any difference in confidence? Yeah, between online and face-to-face students. Now, that question is too broad.
Yeah.
Because first of all, you have to define confidence. Is it self-reported, or are you measuring their anxiety? Are you just asking them, do you feel confident?
The way I saw it is, they in class, they wouldn't raise their hand or they wouldn't volunteer. But I think these are all just assumptions. I think because they're alone and they're this is another assumption. They are from a place that they feel secure. So they're studying from their bedroom, and somehow they're probably opening up more, and then we cannot see their face sometimes. So
so what you're doing is you're testing hypothesis. Yeah. What I suggest is not to find data which confirms your hypothesis. So probably the first part you would do is you would look for any differences in confidence, however you want to do that questionnaire, whatever, between online and face-to-face. And when you talk about students, if you say the question is students, you're then talking about all students in the world, which is too difficult. So you would specify who your population are. So do you mean Thai university students? Do you mean students of English in your class? So specify. So you want to speak for all Thai university students in Thailand?
No, just my students from the university I'm teaching at.
Exactly. So you want to be very specific about your population. And then if you do find any differences, the research question may be something. I mean, this is just an example. I don't know the literature. Are any differences in confidence between online and face-to-face learning amongst Thai university students a result of, then your factor would be a result of home factors? You'd have to define what you want to measure. Is it, you said they're bedroom factors, or you'd have to define what you measure. You would have to measure that.
Okay.
You might want to say something like, are there any differences in confidence? Are any of the differences found between confidence online and face-to-face a result of, I don't know, I would call it something like environmental factors. But you would need to define that.
Yes.
So it's really, those questions are really hard.
Yeah.
The first thing you would have to do is to research for differences. If there are any differences, because if you don't find any differences, there's no point in finding out why they're different. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, was that okay?
It's very helpful. Thank you so much, especially for a beginner like myself. Thank you very much.
You're absolutely right. You can have questions like that, but the key thing is to break down everything.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, there are some participants also suggest some research questions in our chat box as well.
Yep.
Like, what are the factors that affect the online learning of the respondent in terms of blah, blah, blah motivation, for example, or what is the relationship between online learning and EFL learners' motivation? And one more, to what extent is the confidence level of the respondents in their online learning in terms of space or whatever? Do
you want me to go through these? Would that be helpful?
No, that's okay. You can keep going.
How about we talk about these, if there's any time at the end, how about we talk about these research questions? What I'll do is I'll try to, maybe as a group, we can try and break them down further.
Yes, I think it can be something very interesting and looks very practical, I guess.
Right. Okay, so I'm coming to the last couple of things from my slide, but I have a couple of other things I can do as well, but please, let's see what we do. So we can identify what other researchers know about the topic, and this is the thing that we talked about before. What do we know? And know is a horrible word here. What evidence do we have from before? Yeah, we don't actually know anything. We just have evidence. So be careful of saying things like, we have proof. Yeah, if you have proof, you're a mathematician. Yeah, if you have proof, you're a philosopher. We only have evidence. Yeah, just be careful. Was your supervisor Jennifer Jenkins? Yusuf?
No, I'm working with you, Baker.
Yeah, okay. I once had an argument with Jennifer Jenkins about this because she said that in my PhD viva, she was my external examiner, and we had an argument during the viva about proof and proof and evidence, and she said, "Oh, you know, you sound very confident in your PhD," which I wasn't, yeah, because I was very nervous. I was in my PhD viva, and she said, "What are you trying to prove?" And I said to her, "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just finding evidence." And after that, it was an answer to a PhD question, so it was what it made the PhD better because I was arguing against her in some ways. Anyway, so identify the key arguments, themes, and issues which have emerged to date. So we don't ignore what's been done previously. We build on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sometimes you do get you've probably seen them in your own field, very aggressive people who basically their paper says everything that's been done before is rubbish, but what I'm doing is really good. My advice is to be careful of people like that. They're not good people to go for a coffee with, to have a meal with. Yeah? We build upon, we call this hedging. We tend to use words like might, may, appears to be, possibly, probably, yeah, in all likelihood. We don't tend to use words in academia like, of course, it is obvious. That's really saying that other people don't know. Yeah. So we build upon what other people do. Yeah. We identify gaps, and that, as we talked about before, could be gaps in population, could be gaps in we haven't done it with different nationalities, we haven't done it with different students, different levels of students. In my field, different variables, different linguistic variables. We've looked at speech, we haven't looked at writing. We've looked at certain phonemes, certain sounds, we haven't looked at other sounds. Yeah. Are you clear what you mean by key terms? So when we had that really great research question before, there was the word confidence came up. Confidence is really difficult to define. If you're going to measure, this is called a hypothetical construct. It's something like love, something we think which exists, but we can't see. We call this a hypothetical construct. And quite often in psychology or linguistics and applied linguistics and ELT and education, we're measuring constructs because we think confidence is important. So is confidence something which you can self-report? Is it, if I say to someone, are you confident? Can they give me an answer? If so, I can ask them in a questionnaire. But if it's something which I can only observe from other people, do I need to do an ethnographic study? And I think the person who said before about putting their hand, is it related to frequency of putting your hand up? Yeah. It's not just about, if we can define it, we can think about how to measure it. Yeah. So a word like, before we measure confidence, we have to define it. Yeah. We have to spend some time. Now, you don't have to make up a definition. You can use somebody else's.
Yeah.
So following Smith, 1996, confidence is viewed as blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And then in the methodology, we could say, because confidence is measured blah, 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 we will use a self-report questionnaire to measure it. If we think people can tell us, then we'll measure it through a questionnaire. Okay, sorry, I'm talking too much again. Whoops. For some reason, it's not. Yeah, okay. This is the bit which I think you've kind of been asking me. There's different ways of looking at research questions. This post-positivist, I don't like the word positivist because it's got a kind of negative meaning, but kind of experimental questions tend to be formulated in this kind of way, okay? We tend to talk about factors. We tend to talk about effects, okay? So factors associated with levels of speaking proficiency in L2 in your second language in secondary school children, okay? This is what we want to measure. Mm-hmm. So obviously, the dependent variable here would be spoken proficiency in L2 among secondary school children. And the independent variables would be all the factors. It could be gender, it could be educational background, it could be parents, etc., etc. Okay, and these are very general questions. A general research question, what is the relationship between family background factors and levels of spoken proficiency in L2 in secondary school children? I think you've got some practice of this. Can you tell me what the dependent variable is? I'm afraid I can't see the chat, so. The dependent variable is level of spoken proficiency in L2. The population is secondary school children, which needs to be refined. And the independent variable or the background variable is family background factors. Now, I've left this very vague. What could this be? What kind of family background factors could we measure?
So you try to narrow it down.
Yeah, we need to define what we mean by family background factors. Is it time that your parents spend with you teaching? Yeah. Is it number of books you have in the house? Is it something to do with
income?
Income? Yeah. Is it number of children in the house? Is it whether you have, I don't have a nanny, but is it whether you have a nanny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe also the occupation as well.
Yeah. Is it something to do with the proficiency of your parents? The education of your parents? These are all family background factors. So that general research question is very, very, very broad and needs to be broken down. Okay. And here's another specific question. What is the relationship between socioeconomic status of the family and spoken levels of proficiency? Yeah, so socioeconomic status, we could measure it through education, we could measure it through income, we could measure it through size of house, we could measure it through which part of the city you come from. Yeah, and we could measure it through your parents' income, your mother's income, your father's income, the joint income. So you can see that when we're writing research questions, the important thing is to define things. Yeah. People tend to say, my research is really difficult, or I can't answer this question. It's probably because the question needs to be broken down. Yeah. Anyway, so these are examples of kind of questions you get when you do something experimentally, and I've called this interpretive generally, or critical, sometimes called critical paradigm theories, tend to use methods like ethnographic measures, or tend to use participant observation. You know, maybe sit in the classroom, or tend to use you know, longer term kind of interviews or long-term interviews. I'm sure you have your own ideas about this. So I do this now and again, or thematic analysis, for example, when they're analysing the data. So how do UK learners' experience of studying foreign languages and adult education programmes input on attitudes towards immigration in England? Now, that is a terribly hard question. Can you think of things there which are difficult to measure? or difficult to define? If I was going to do this,
Attitude.
Yeah.
Again.
Personal
I think
values.
Attitude.
Attitude, yeah, we need to measure. What do you mean by attitudes? Attitude towards immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think personal values is also very important to define. What does it mean?
Did you say experience? Which one did you say? There's a few words there for impact,
Experience, yes.
experience, and attitudes. What do you? You're absolutely. Is it Carolus? Carolus, yeah. That's really good. So these, particularly experience, impact, and attitudes.
Like, yes, because I think attitude is something like, it's hard to measure because it's something mind. So we can measure as in statistics, something like that.
Yeah, we've so for example, we need maybe some kind of scale. And then from that scale, we would get numbers and look at differences. Very good. Okay. I mean, also, adult education programs, you would have to be more specific at what you mean. We probably need to talk about, this question is basically, this is a question which the government, UK government, looked at after Brexit. You know, one of the reasons for, I'm Scottish, but in England, they voted for Brexit, for Britain to leave the European Union, is they thought that there was too many people coming from Eastern Europe. And they wanted to see if people were learning foreign languages, would it make them more positive towards European integration? This is where this question comes from. A much more applied linguistics question. How do language teachers' personal values affect relationships between L1 speaking and L2 speaking pupils in the classroom? Now, this is something which is interesting for me because at my university, we have lots of overseas students from all over the world, including Thailand and Malaysia. And we also have lots of home students from England and Scotland and Ireland and Wales. Which things here are difficult to measure or do we need to define?
Yes, teachers' personal values.
As someone who does something very experimental, I would find this really difficult to measure. How do you go about defining a personal value? Is it my politics? Is it my love of teaching? Is it whether I'm an optimistic or pessimistic person? Is it my personality? And then also the relationships. What do we mean by the relationships? Do we mean they like each other? Do we mean they can work well together? Okay, so here the dependent variable is the relationship between L1 and L1 students, English-speaking students, and the independent variable, the variable which affects the relationships, as the personal values. And these, you know, for this, I probably couldn't do this experimentally. I'd probably have to do it with some kind of ethnographic research amongst a small group of people. You might choose to do it differently. Okay, I'm almost finished. If you want to read a very good book about all this stuff about good and bad research, there's a book called Bad Science. It's a little bit old now, but it keeps getting updated and it's very good. This is kind of things I used. I didn't do a very, very detailed bibliography because I thought it wouldn't be very useful. But so there's just a few. I talked about this, my own research and attitudes, and this is a really good book as well, Research Design Explained. And if you want to do statistics and you've never done it before, can I recommend Julie Pallant, SPSS Survival Manual? It doesn't treat you like you're a mathematician. It tells you, press this button. Yeah, it's not theory. It tells you what to do and what it means rather than teaches you mathematics. Okay, I'm guessing this time I'll probably put this up on, I can put this up later on the website or something. Is that okay, Yusuf?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I have a little bit more. I realize it's now 25 to 10, sorry, which is 25 to 5 in your time. Is that right?
Yes, you're right.
I have a little bit more, which I can do, but I'm also happy to stop and talk for comments.
Yes,
I've got a little,
Yeah.
it's entirely up to you. I'll stop sharing this and I'll share something else, but I'm also happy to do, put this on later.
Of course, yes. I mean, you can try to do what you have prepared. Yes.
Yeah. This is just, I was going to talk about this and I was going to give you an example from my attitudes research, but I thought because you were interacting with me so much that I might drop that out. I hope that's, I'll put up the attitude slide later. But if you're going to do a research paper, this is basically, and I'll put this up on the site, so I'll just go through it very quickly. Any research paper, qualitative, quantitative, scientific, non-scientific, linguistics, education, psychology, sociology, chemistry, maths, if it's collecting data, has this structure. Traditionally, it's been called IMRAD, but it doesn't, you don't hear this so much now. Introduction, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion. Okay, and I'll just go over this very quickly because I'll leave it on the site. In the introduction, what you do is you situate your study. You say, you expand it from previous research. You discuss what's been done in the past. You define terms like attitude, knowledge, proficiency, face-to-face, online as confidence. These are the, you will discuss any existing theories. And then at the end of that, you will say, as I said before, this is what we have evidence for. This is what is missing. This is what I'm going to do. And if you look here, it argues for the existence of a research niche, need, requirement, lack of, more, further. All these words you'll see at the end of the introduction, just before the methodology. And then you will say, in light of the above discussion, given the discussion above, the following research questions were developed for the purposes of this study. Something like that. Yeah, so it's based on the prior evidence, we will answer the following research questions. Okay, now these research questions can either be at the end of the introduction, or they can be at the beginning of the methodology. I tend to put it at the end of the introduction because it's easier. Okay, the methodology, as we talked before, describes your research, not someone else's research. Yeah, you can ignore other people's research. You can say followings, blah, 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 blah. So details the ways in which you collect data. It will have participants, maybe your variables. So I'm going to measure gender. You don't have to have variables. Research instruments, questionnaire, ethnographic study, interviews, etc. Ethics, a pilot study, what you did with participants before to find out if your instruments are working, and then procedure. Bad or unfinished papers are all procedure. They just describe what you did. They don't talk about the instruments and the participants. Okay. The reader needs to know this if they're going to do the study again. Okay. The results of any analysis. Now, people get scared when they're reading this section. My advice is, if you don't understand the statistics or the analysis, ignore it. Or flick through it, skim through it. A good researcher, the last sentence here, will give you a short summary of the results. Yeah. A good researcher, a good piece of research communicates to you. It doesn't make you do the work. If the statistics are just too difficult, or you don't have experience of the analysis, whether it's numbers or, yeah, go straight to the summary of the results. the written text about it. Yeah. And a good researcher, again, in the discussion, will again summarize the results. Okay. But they'll compare it and contrast with the findings of what's been done before. So, for example, my Japanese attitude research in Japan, I found that Japanese students were very negative towards their own English. But I found Thai students in Chiang Mai and Bangkok were very positive towards Thai English, which is different. Okay. And when you're doing the discussion, you don't just talk about the differences, you also talk about the similarities. Yeah. Sometimes people forget that. And then from that, you can talk about implied linguistics is sometimes called the so what question. What does this mean? And here you can interpret yourself. Does it mean we need to develop new methodologies? Does it agree with theory? Is it important for language policy? Is it important for the classroom? Is it important for society? And then at the end, limitations. So maybe I only use 40 students. I only use students at one university. I tend to do things quantitatively, experimentally. I use numbers. Could I also use interviews? The limitations are really useful. And then from the limitations, you can say what's been done in the future. And from that, you can, sometimes the limitation, this is also in the conclusion, so I'll put those two together. Very quickly, and I promise I won't speak for much longer. When you're looking at the research, a paper, I suggest, particularly if you're new to research, look at these. So what is the research question? What method did the researchers use to investigate it? So for example, did they use questionnaires? Did they use interviews? Did they use, I don't know, sit in the classroom, participant observation? What did they find? How did they analyze the data? How are the findings different or similar to what's done previously? How did the authors interpret those results? What do they think it means? And as a researcher in your own research, always ask yourself, what has my research advanced our knowledge of? What do we know more now than we did before? But also, what's missing and what can I do in the future? Now, if you're going to apply for a grant, this is the important piece. If you can say, I've done this research, but I need to do more, you can say to, for example, the Thai government, can you give me more money? I've done it. This has been done, but I need this. This hasn't been done. Can I have some more money to do this? Okay. I think I've talked lots. Please, I'll open the floor to you, if that's okay, Yusuf, or the audience.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Should I stop sharing?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So that's the question and answer then. So if you have any questions, so please feel free to address it to the speaker. Or you can leave your question in the chat box and then we will read it to the speaker.
And please don't be shy.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I thank you very much, PSU, for organizing this very interesting seminar.
Oh,
my name is Muslim. My name is Muslim Broker.
Oh yeah, you studied with me.
Oh yeah, yeah. In 2013, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Good luck in Southampton.
Yeah, I'm in Southampton now. Yeah. I've got two questions regarding your research. The first one is about conceptualization. How do you conceptualize attitudes? Is your conceptualization similar to perceptions or belief? My second question is, when it comes to analysis, how do you take ideologies into consideration?
You're absolutely right. When you do, this is what I was actually going to talk about this. I'll put it online and it's got a definition of attitudes. You're absolutely right. Without defining these terms, attitude You can't measure attitudes, you can't investigate attitudes. So I come from a psychology background. So for me, attitude is an evaluation, and it has an effect. So it has an emotional component, it has a cognitive component, so about thinking, and it also has a behavioral component. So when I'm measuring attitudes, I have to measure those three things. I have to measure the person's feelings, their thoughts, and their behavior. More recently, because I come from a psychology background, I've been measuring implicit attitudes, so attitudes that we're unaware of, and also attitudes that we are aware of. So I've been using methods. I won't go into it too much, but I've been using experimental methods where people are on the computer and I'm measuring reaction times. And for example, I'm measuring their speed of reaction to make a certain sound with a positive word, or a certain language with a positive word, to show how much they associate positivity with certain languages or certain features. Sorry, that's really difficult, but I've been looking at more conscious and unconscious attitudes and comparing the different levels. Yeah, the problem when you're, and I think we talked a little bit about this, the problem when we're measuring things like confidence or attitudes is if we ask people, they often don't tell us the right answer because they don't want to seem prejudiced. So we need to find ways of asking them or getting data where they're not aware of it.
Actually, based on my experience when I was conducting my PhD at Southampton University, during my viva, my PhD viva, the first question that I was asked by the external examiners was that, what is the truth in your research? Yeah, it's something very, very challenging actually. And I look on my supervisor face, Professor Will Baker, and he just said nothing. And then and actually during that time I still didn't understand what does what it mean. So I asked the examiner to clarify the questions. And the point is that because I'm dealing with the attitudes, ideology, perceptions of the teachers, students, and administrators regarding how do they construct native and non-nativeness in Thailand. And so it's somehow very difficult, to analyze or to try to analyze the way people think in their mind, regarding beliefs or attitudes. Even though we have some sections that we are talking about the validity, reliability in the thesis, but it's still not enough. When we are dealing with perception or belief and ideologies, it's very difficult to judge if the participants. How could I make sure during my interview that the participant telling me the truth, which is very challenging actually. So what I explained to the examiner is that because I collected my data from 4 different universities, throughout Thailand, one from the north, one from the south, and one in Bangkok, and one from the northeast, I guess. And during my first time when I visiting my research site, I perceive myself as a stranger. So if I start my data collection with asking the student why they are walking, around the university, they might not giving me the answer, or they may afraid who am I. So what I did is that I tried to contact to their lecturers, and I tried to propose as a teacher assistant. So before I starting my data collection, actually, I work as the teacher assistant. With the teachers during the class. So normally during the class, I was a part of their teaching and learning as well. So I spent about 2 weeks to try to be familiar and walking around their university to try to make sure that they know who am I. And after 2 weeks, they're getting to know more about me because and they try to trust me more because I'm working with their lecturers. So in that case, what I'm trying to say that trust, what do they call building trust? I guess building trust or trustworthiness concepts is it's good point to start. If you want to build once someone trust you and know more about you, there is high possibility. I'm not going to confirm that you will get you will get like a 100% the truth about, I mean, from the participant, but there is more like a high possibility that they will telling you the truth. Yeah, that's what I try to explain to the examiner, and it seems like the examiner looks really happy to my answer. Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is social desirability bias, where people want to give the researcher the right answer, and
because
it's always an issue. It's an issue in any research, and all we can do is try to minimize it.
Yeah, the point is that when we try to interview the participants, one of the main issues that's somehow very complex and very controversial is that when we ask the participant question, sometimes the participant just try to answer in order to please the researchers. Yeah. So what does it mean here? It means like, okay, this is not their answers. It's someone else's answer. They just want to please us. Or some participants, when we ask them questions, they might think of how do people in society perceive about these particular issues, and they try to summarize those people, the ideas of the people in society to become their own idea, and then the answer to us. So again, these answers still not their own ideas. So these two issues are very difficult in qualitative, I guess, in qualitative research. But again, what we can do, just try to building trust. Yeah, I think that's something what we can do. But again, it's not we are not be able to prove that we will get the real answer from them. But at least if we are, we will get. At least there is high possibilities based on what we have done, what we have implemented to them, that we are able to get the truth answer.
Yep. Thanks for that. I agree. I'll just finish Muslim's answer. I think you also asked about ideology. Well, you're absolutely right. The attitude and ideology attitude is really, they're from two theoretical backgrounds. Attitude is really from social psychology traditionally, and ideology is a concept investigated in sociology. The way I get around it is that an ideology is for me, and it doesn't have to be for you, an ideology is a directional attitude. It tells you something about the direction. So, for example, a native speaker ideology would generally have would generally result in negative attitudes towards L2 varieties of English and more positive attitudes towards L1 varieties of English or L1 teachers. That's kind of how I would get around it. So ideology talks about the direction, and attitude is just the evaluation. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that helps or not.
Thank you very much.
Please feel free to do it in your own way.
Muslim is that it seems like your question will be based on your PhD thesis, right?
Yeah, I'm working on ideology as well.
Okay, yeah. It's good to see. It's good to see you here today, and I hope that I can see you in person when you came back to Thailand.
Yeah,
I hope so. Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in from so early in the morning from Southampton.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I really enjoy listening to your presentation.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to hear from you again. I know you were a great student.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so are there any more questions? I got one question from the chat box. Okay, so
I think there's a few, yeah.
Okay, so some researchers differentiate theoretical framework from conceptual framework. Others do not. So the question is, how about you?
I think you know what my answer is going to be. I'm going to say, it depends what you mean by theoretical framework from conceptual framework. Because I'm a social linguist, I tend to make theory from data. It's how I was, and because I come from a social psychology background, I tend to get the data and then apply it to the theory, than have the theory first and test it. I tend to work that way but other researchers work with theory first, and then they test the theory according to the data they get. I tend to get the data and then try and explain it through theoretical constructs, or try to adapt the theory to it. Yeah, And you know, we all do those in different ways. So for me, it doesn't make much difference between theoretical framework and conceptual framework, though. In my idea of conceptual framework always includes the definitions of the concepts, if you mean it in that way. I suppose my answer is that it's not that important to me, but I'm happy to. What do you think, Fillmore? I mean, feel free not to answer as well. Or what does anyone else think? It's not so important to me because of the way I work, but I know it's important to other people.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm asking because in some among some research professors in the Philippines, there seem to be this different definitions. So for instance, when they talk about theoretical framework, is the theory that you are using in framing your research. And when they talk about conceptual framework, it's how you are organizing your actual research to be able to come up with the data. It's like the flow of your research.
Do you mean your methodology?
Yeah. Methodology, yeah.
Well, for me, theory and method are linked, but they should be mentioned in a different part of the paper. Yeah. Did you study in a US context?
Actually, my previous professors have various backgrounds as well. So some of them studied using US context. So that's why there's this mixed paradigms as far as conducting research is concerned.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about conceptual framework, it's as methodology. Because of my background, I tend to call it methodology, methodological approach, if you like. Yeah, I would have it in the methodology. But for me, it's just a difference in terminology. But you know, don't feel free to, of course, use your own words. You know, it's a great question.
Okay, thank you. And I'm happy to be joining this event with you.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to hear someone from the Philippines. I was supposed to speak at World Englishes Conference a few years ago there, and I didn't manage to make it, so I've always regretted it. In Quezon City.
Any more questions then?
Okay, maybe they have no questions. Ajahn Passan, maybe you can move into the next next activity for today. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So if there's no more question, okay, I think the talk is over. So on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank Dr. Robert McKenzie for serving as our speaker today. We are also glad you could be here today. So your willingness to share your expertise and your experience in doing empirical research in applied linguistics is critical to the success of today's talk. And I think your insights on doing research of this kind will undoubtedly help us overcome the challenges we are facing or the challenges we might have in the future doing and publishing empirical research in the. So thank you very, very much, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you too. You were great. I'm really enthusiastic about talking about research with people. Even if you're new to it, don't worry about it. We're all new to research at some point, and as a researcher, I've been doing it for quite a long time, and I'm still learning too.
Yeah. Okay. And it seems that this is going to be your last session for PSG Open Mobility 2021, right?
That's great. Yeah.
We hope we can, invite you more. In the future.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. As I said, I think I'm getting an invitation from Mahidon. So if I get an invitation from Mahidon, I'll certainly try and come down and visit you.
Yes, sure, for sure, yeah.
If not online.
Okay, so before you leave the meeting, may I now ask all of you to kindly give us your feedback on the event by completing an evaluation form available in the link just given to you in the chat box. Okay, so your comments will help us better the next event to come probably by the end of this month. Okay, so once you have completed the evaluation form, you will be directed to the link to the certificate of participation. So just go to the link given and then you can collect your certificate of participation.
So that means the participant have to fill 2 forms, right? Okay, they have to complete 2 different forms. The first form is the evaluation form, and by the end of the evaluation form, there is another link for certificate. So make sure that everyone complete both of them in order to collect the certificate. Thank you.
So thanks for the link then.
Yes.
Okay, so may I now announce the next webinar. So I would like to share the screen for you. Okay. So,
okay, yes.
Yeah, so please be informed that the next webinar will be on the 20th of January, 2022 at 2:30 to 4:30 on the 20th. Okay, so you will be meeting with Associate Professor Dr. Will Baker from Southampton University, UK, and he will be talking about transcultural communication and global Englishes. So please don't miss it. You can register now by going to the link. Again, I will give you the link.
Yes, the link was already posted in the chat box.
Okay. So thank you for that. Okay. So thank you. So as the moderator, today I would like to express my sincere thanks and my cordial appreciation to all of you again, to the speaker, the participants, and the project manager, and the team for participating and supporting us to make this talk a success. So stay safe and goodbye. See you on the 20th.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again very much, everyone. And thank you, Professor Robert McKenzie, for your time, your sacrifice, okay, and for your accepting the our invitation. And we do really hope that we will be able to meet you again, either virtual or in person in the future. So everyone, thank you. Thank you very much for actively participation in our session today, and hope please stay safe from the pandemic. And so everyone have a good day and have a good night.